We can't
Margaret
keep
Hayes
living in the
stood at the iron
past.
gates of Hillside
It's time to move
Cemetery,
on.
her silver hair catching the afternoon light. At 62, she had everything money could buy, except the one thing that mattered most. Her daughter, Emma, had been gone for 3 years now, and the emptiness never quite went away. She visited every Tuesday afternoon, always alone, always at 3 o'clock when the cemetery was quietest. As Margaret walked the familiar path toward Emma's grave, she noticed something unusual. A man in a janitor's uniform was kneeling beside her daughter's headstone, and beside him sat a little girl, no more than 5 years old, with long brown hair and a yellow sweater. They were both crying softly. Margaret felt her heart tighten. She quickened her pace, her heels clicking on the stone pathway. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice sharp with confusion. "What are you doing here?" "This is my daughter's grave." The man looked up, startled. He was in his mid-30s with kind eyes and work-worn hands. The little girl clutched his arm, frightened by Margaret's tone. "I'm so sorry, ma'am," the man said, quickly wiping his eyes. He helped the little girl to her feet. "We didn't mean any disrespect. We come here sometimes. We'll leave right away." Margaret looked down at the grave and noticed something she'd never seen before. Fresh flowers lay there, simple daisies, nothing expensive but arranged with obvious care. And beside them was a small drawing, clearly made by a child, showing stick figures holding hands under a rainbow. "Wait," Margaret said, her voice softer now. "Please, I'd like to understand. How did you know my daughter?" The man hesitated, glancing down at the little girl, who had buried her face against his leg. "My name is Daniel Foster," he said quietly. "And this is my daughter, Sophie." "Your daughter, Emma. She was the kindest person I ever met." Margaret felt tears spring to her eyes at the sound of someone else speaking her daughter's name with such genuine affection. "Please," she said, gesturing to a nearby bench. "Would you sit with me? Tell me about her." Daniel looked surprised, but he nodded. They walked together to the bench, and Sophie climbed onto her father's lap, still watching Margaret with cautious eyes. "I work as a custodian at Mercy General Hospital," Daniel began. 3 years ago, my wife Sarah was diagnosed with cancer. We didn't have much, no insurance, no savings. I was working 2 jobs just to try to keep up with the bills." Margaret listened, her heart aching. "Emma was Sarah's nurse," Daniel continued, his voice thick with emotion. "She took care of my wife for 6 months. But it wasn't just the medical care. Emma would stay after her shift ended. She'd sit with Sarah, talk to her, make her laugh. When Sarah was too weak to speak, Emma would read to her." Margaret closed her eyes, picturing her daughter doing exactly that. Emma had always had such a generous heart. "One day," Daniel went on, "Emma found out that I couldn't afford childcare for Sophie. I'd been bringing her to the hospital and leaving her in the waiting room. While I worked the night shift cleaning, Emma started looking after Sophie during those nights. She'd bring books and toys from home. She taught Sophie to draw. She made my daughter feel safe during the scariest time of our lives." "I didn't know," Margaret whispered. "She never told me." "That was Emma," Daniel said with a sad smile. "She never wanted recognition. She just wanted to help." Sophie, who had been silent until now, spoke up in a small voice. "Miss Emma gave me this." She held out a worn stuffed rabbit. "She said whenever I missed Mommy, I should hug Mr. Hops and remember that love never goes away." Margaret felt tears streaming down her face. After Emma had died in a car accident, Margaret had gone through her daughter's apartment. But she'd never understood. All the children's books and toys she'd found there. Now it made sense. "Sarah passed away 3 years ago," Daniel said quietly. 2 weeks later, we heard about Emma's accident. Sophie and I were heartbroken all over again. We had no family at the funeral. We didn't think we'd be welcome. But we needed somewhere to say goodbye. So we started coming here to talk to her and thank her." Margaret looked at this man who cleaned floors for a living, who had lost his wife, who was raising his daughter alone, and who still found time to bring flowers to a grave. "You've been coming here all this time?" she asked. "For 3 years?" Daniel nodded. "Usually early in the morning before my shift. We leave flowers when we can afford them. Sophie draws pictures. It helps us both." Margaret realized that while she'd been mourning alone in her big empty house, feeling sorry for herself, these two had been here honoring her daughter's memory with the little they had. "I'm sorry I spoke to you so harshly," Margaret said. "I've been so lost in my own grief I forgot that Emma touched so many lives." "You have nothing to apologize for," Daniel said gently. "Losing a child. I can't imagine anything harder." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the sunlight filter through the trees. "Daniel," Margaret said finally, "would you and Sophie like to come to dinner this week? I'd love to hear more stories about Emma, and I think Emma would want us to be friends." Daniel looked at her with surprise and gratitude. "We'd be honored, ma'am. Please call me Margaret." Sophie tugged on her father's sleeve. "Daddy, can I show Miss Margaret my drawings of Miss Emma?" "Of course, sweetheart." Sophie pulled out a small folder from her backpack and carefully opened it. Inside were dozens of crayon drawings, Emma reading books, Emma in her nurse's uniform, Emma with a big smile and golden hair like sunshine. Margaret looked through each one, her heart both breaking and healing at the same time. "These are beautiful, Sophie," she said. Would you like to see some photographs of Emma when she was a little girl like you?" Sophie's eyes lit up. "Really?" "Really. I have albums full of pictures at my house. And I have her favorite books from when she was young. I think she'd want you to have them." Over the following weeks, Tuesday afternoons became special for all of them. Margaret would meet Daniel and Sophie at the cemetery, and then they'd go back to her house for tea and cookies. Margaret shared stories of Emma's childhood, and Daniel shared stories of Emma's kindness during those difficult hospital days. Slowly, Margaret's large, quiet house filled with laughter again. She helped Daniel enroll Sophie in a better school. She set up a small college fund for Sophie's future, not as charity, but as something Emma would have wanted. In return, Daniel helped Margaret with repairs around her house and taught her that wealth wasn't measured in dollars, but in the connections we make. Sophie started calling Margaret Grandma Margaret, and Margaret discovered that love doesn't divide when shared. It multiplies. One Tuesday, nearly 6 months after their first meeting, Margaret stood at Emma's grave with Daniel and Sophie. Sophie had just placed her latest drawing, one that showed 4 stick figures, Mommy and Emma as angels in the sky, and Daddy and Grandma Margaret holding hands below, all connected by a golden thread. "Thank you, Emma," Margaret whispered, touching the headstone. "Thank you for bringing them to me." As they walked back toward the gates together, Sophie slipped her small hand into Margaret's. It was then that Margaret understood what Emma had known all along, that the greatest gift we can give is kindness, and the greatest legacy is love that continues even after we're gone. The lonely billionaire had come to a grave seeking her daughter, and found instead what her daughter had left behind. A reminder that family isn't just about blood. It's about the hearts we touch and the lives we change. And sometimes in our deepest grief, grace arrives in the form of a janitor and a little girl with flowers, teaching us that we're never truly alone.